In our daily lives, we often recognize and respond to physical injuries with urgency. A cut, a burn, or a broken bone is visible, measurable, and generally treated with proper care. However, many people walk around with emotional and psychological wounds that go entirely unnoticed, not because they aren't serious, but because they are hidden beneath the surface. These are the wounds that don't bleed but ache. They don't require stitches, yet they affect the very core of a person's identity, decision making, and relationships. Hidden wounds are emotional injuries sustained from experiences such as rejection, abandonment, humiliation, failure, or abuse, whether verbal, physical, or emotional. Unlike physical injuries, these wounds don't have clear signs that alert others. Instead, they show up in more subtle ways. A person's inability to trust others, constant self-doubt, sudden anger, withdrawal from relationships, or an inner sense of emptiness. These behaviors and feelings are not random. They are often protective responses developed unconsciously as a result of past pain. Understanding hidden wounds begins by acknowledging their existence and recognizing that emotional pain is real. The human brain processes emotional and physical pain using similar neural pathways. According to neuroscience research, areas such as the anterior cingulate cortex and prefrontal cortex light up in brain scans both when a person experiences physical pain and when they go through emotional rejection or loss. This shows that psychological injuries are not just in the mind. They have a physiological basis and real effects on brain function and overall health. One of the reasons hidden wounds are so impactful is because they are often buried. People may not even be aware that they are carrying these injuries. A person who was constantly criticized as a child may grow up with low self-esteem, but never make the connection between their present day struggles and their past experiences. Instead, they might attribute their failures to laziness or lack of ability. This misinterpretation leads to more internal damage and deepens the wound. Over time, this emotional baggage affects choices in careers, friendships, and even how one raises their own children. Another critical aspect of hidden wounds is that they are often minimized by society, families, and even the individuals themselves. Someone who is told to toughen up or get over it may internalize the belief that emotional pain is a weakness. This attitude prevents healing and often leads to suppression rather than expression. Suppressed emotional pain doesn't vanish. It manifests in other ways, sometimes through chronic stress, anxiety, depression, or even physical illnesses like migraines, heart disease, or digestive problems. The mind and body are deeply interconnected, and what affects one invariably influences the other. Educating ourselves about the existence and influence of hidden wounds allows for a more compassionate and realistic understanding of human behavior. It teaches us not to judge ourselves or others too quickly. That co-worker who avoids collaboration may not be arrogant. Perhaps they were betrayed in a previous work environment. That friend who overreacts to small mistakes may be battling deep-seated insecurities from past rejection. By understanding that there may be pain behind the personality, we begin to foster empathy, patience, and connection. In a broader context, this understanding also has implications for education, leadership, and healthcare. Teachers who recognize the emotional struggles of students can provide safer, more nurturing learning environments. Managers who acknowledge the emotional well-being of employees create workplaces that foster mental resilience and motivation. Healthcare professionals who treat not only the body but also the emotional experiences of patients can offer more holistic and effective care. In conclusion, hidden wounds may not be visible, but they shape how people live, love, and lead. Awareness is the first step in addressing them. Just as we don't ignore a broken bone, we must also not overlook a broken spirit. Only when we begin to understand and respect the depth of invisible pain can true healing begin. To understand emotional healing, we must first explore where inner wounds come from. These hidden injuries are not the result of one-time inconveniences or disappointments. They often originate from significant emotional experiences, especially those that are unresolved, misunderstood, or repeated over time. The sources of inner wounds are as diverse as the human experience, yet they tend to follow certain identifiable patterns that shape the emotional lives of individuals. One of the most common sources of inner wounds is childhood trauma. During the early stages of development, a child's brain is forming its understanding of the world, relationships, and self-worth. Any form of neglect, abuse, or emotional inconsistency during this period can leave a lasting imprint. For example, a child who grows up in a home where affection is withheld may internalize the belief that they are unlovable. Similarly, a child constantly criticized may develop a deep fear of failure or rejection. These early experiences may seem distant or forgotten, but they often resurface in adulthood as patterns of low self-esteem, anxiety, or difficulty forming secure attachments. Another significant source of emotional wounds is rejection. Humans are wired for connection. From an evolutionary standpoint, being accepted by others ensured survival, so rejection often feels like a threat, even when it occurs in non-life-threatening situations. Whether it's being excluded from a group, experiencing a breakup, or facing persistent disapproval, rejection can wound a person's core identity. Repeated rejection, particularly when it comes from people who were supposed to offer love and support, can lead to feelings of worthlessness or fear of intimacy. Betrayal is another deeply damaging source. When someone we trust, whether a parent, friend, partner, or leader, violates that trust, the result can be both shock and emotional injury. Betrayal cuts deeper because it is personal. It carries the message that the person who was supposed to protect you instead caused you harm. This breach of trust can create long-lasting issues with vulnerability and connection, often resulting in hypervigilance or emotional withdrawal. Loss also leaves significant emotional scars. Whether it's the death of a loved one, the end of a relationship, or the collapse of a dream or career, loss forces individuals to confront change, uncertainty, and grief. While grief is a natural part of life, unprocessed grief, especially when societal or cultural pressures discourage open mourning, can fester into long-term emotional wounds. People may become stuck in sadness or numbness, unable to move forward emotionally. Another less obvious but equally impactful source is chronic invalidation. This occurs when a person's feelings, thoughts, or needs are regularly dismissed or minimized. If someone hears statements like "you're too sensitive," or "that's not a big deal," often enough they begin to question their own emotional reality. This undermines emotional confidence and fosters self-doubt, making individuals more susceptible to anxiety, depression, and dependency. Lastly, failure and public humiliation can leave profound scars. In a society that often equates worth with achievement, failure can be interpreted not just as a lack of success, but as a personal defect. If that failure is accompanied by ridicule, criticism, or shame, it can damage a person's identity. This leads to perfectionism, fear of trying new things, or complete withdrawal from meaningful challenges. It's important to understand that wounds are not always the result of dramatic or violent events. Often, it is the quiet, consistent experiences, such as never feeling heard, always being compared to others, or being made to feel invisible, that shape a person's emotional world. These subtle forms of emotional harm can be just as damaging as more obvious traumas. By recognizing the sources of inner wounds, we move one step closer to healing. Awareness empowers individuals to trace patterns in their emotional lives back to their roots. When people understand where their pain comes from, they are better equipped to challenge old beliefs, set healthy boundaries, and take steps toward recovery. Emotional pain is often treated as something less real than physical pain, a subjective feeling that can be brushed aside or managed with willpower. However, modern neuroscience has shattered this outdated perspective. Scientific research reveals that emotional pain is not just a metaphorical experience. It is deeply rooted in brain activity and physiology. Understanding the science behind emotional pain is crucial, not only for validating our internal experiences, but also for designing effective paths to healing. One of the most significant findings in recent neuroscience is that the brain processes emotional pain in much the same way as physical pain. When someone experiences emotional distress, like social rejection, humiliation, or grief, the brain's anterior cingulate cortex, the same area that lights up during physical injury, becomes active. This overlap explains why people say things like "my heart aches" or "that hurt." After an emotional blow, the experience is not imagined, it is neurologically real. Functional MRI fMRI studies provide vivid images of this process. In one well-known study, participants who were recently rejected by a romantic partner showed increased brain activity in the same pain-related regions activated by physical injuries. The implication is profound. The brain does not sharply distinguish between a broken leg and a broken heart. Both types of pain can impair focus, reduce motivation, and increase the risk of depression. This helps explain why emotional wounds can feel so debilitating, even when there's no visible cause. Another area of research shows that chronic emotional pain changes the brain's structure and chemistry over time. People who endure long-term emotional trauma or stress, whether due to loss, neglect, or unresolved conflict, often experience changes in the amygdala, which processes fear, the hippocampus responsible for memory, and the prefrontal cortex, which regulates decision-making and social behavior. These changes can lead to hyper-alertness, poor emotional regulation, and memory disturbances. In short, repeated emotional pain doesn't just hurt. It reprograms the brain, reinforcing cycles of fear, withdrawal, or self-sabotage. One fascinating discovery is how neuroplasticity, the brain's ability to adapt, can work both for and against us. When someone is exposed to repeated emotional trauma, the brain strengthens neural pathways that respond to fear and stress. This means the person becomes more sensitive to threats, even in safe environments. For example, a person who was frequently criticized as a child may overreact to constructive feedback as an adult, not because of ego, but because the brain has been conditioned to associate such input with danger or rejection. At the same time, this neuroplasticity is also a beacon of hope. Just as the brain can be shaped by pain, it can also be reshaped by healing practices. Mindfulness therapy and supportive relationships have been shown to rewire the brain, reducing the size of the amygdala and enhancing the prefrontal cortex's ability to manage emotional responses. This explains why consistent emotional work can lead to tangible, measurable improvements in mental health and behavior. Additionally, emotional pain has physiological consequences that extend beyond the brain. Stress hormones like cortisol and adrenaline flood the body during emotional distress, preparing the system for fight or flight. While this response is helpful in short bursts, Chronic emotional pain keeps the body in a heightened state of alert. Over time, this can lead to problems such as insomnia, weakened immunity, digestive issues, heart disease, and even chronic fatigue. This understanding reinforces an important point. Emotional pain should be treated with the same seriousness as physical illness. It is not a weakness or exaggeration. It is a complex, scientifically measurable experience that impacts mental and physical health. Educating ourselves about the brain's role in emotional suffering removes stigma and lays the groundwork for healing. In conclusion, the science behind emotional pain is clear. It is real, it is powerful, and it deserves care. When we acknowledge emotional wounds as legitimate and biological, we open the door to evidence-based healing and long-term well-being.